After 75, most people don't wake up thinking about falling. They wake up thinking about coffee, about what aches a little more than yesterday, about whether they slept wrong or just slept lightly again. They think about the day ahead, the errands, the calls they should return, the small promises they make to themselves every morning like, "I'll take it easier today," or "I should probably move a bit more." Falling doesn't enter the picture. And that's exactly why it shows up later, quietly, almost politely, when no one is expecting it. This story isn't about clumsiness. It's not about being careless. And it's definitely not about age in the way people usually mean it. It's about a tiny daily mistake that feels harmless, even reasonable, that slowly changes how the body behaves without asking for permission. A mistake so common that most people wouldn't even call it a mistake. They'd call it normal. They'd call it practical. They'd call it just how I do things now. What makes this mistake dangerous isn't what happens the first week or the first year. It's what happens when the body quietly adapts to it. Because the body is incredibly loyal. Whatever you ask it to get used to, it will. Even if that adaptation makes you less stable over time. Even if it subtly changes how you walk, how you turn, how you recover when something unexpected happens. Most falls don't happen during something dramatic. They don't happen while climbing mountains or running across busy streets. They happen while reaching for something familiar, while standing up too quickly, while turning around in the kitchen, while stepping slightly sideways to avoid a chair leg that's been there for 20 years. And when people replay those moments later, they often say the same thing. "I don't know what happened. One moment I was fine, and the next I was on the floor." That sentence tells us everything, because what really happened didn't start in that moment. It started years earlier, in dozens of small, forgettable choices that slowly trained the body to rely on less balance, less awareness, less feedback from the ground. Choices that made life feel easier in the short term and riskier in the long one. Let's talk about the mistake itself, but gently, because once you see it, you'll realize how understandable it is. It's the habit of moving through the day without fully using your feet. That may sound strange at first. After all, you walk every day, you stand, you move around. But using your feet and relying on your feet are two very different things. Somewhere along the way, many people start treating their feet like passive supports instead of active partners. Shoes get thicker, softer, more forgiving, floors get smoother, movements get smaller, steps get shorter. The feet stop sending clear messages to the brain about where the ground is, how firm it is, how the body is positioned above it. And the brain, receiving less information, stops asking for it. This doesn't feel like a problem. In fact, it feels comfortable. Cushioned shoes feel nice. Shuffling slightly instead of lifting the feet feels safer. Holding onto furniture while moving through the house feels sensible. Sitting more often feels deserved. None of these choices feel wrong. They feel like adjustments. Smart ones. But here's the quiet truth. Balance is not something you have. It's something you practice without realizing it. Every step is a conversation between your feet, your legs, your core, and your awareness. When that conversation gets shorter, simpler, or quieter, your ability to react fades with it. Imagine learning a language and then slowly stopping using certain words. You can still communicate, but when you suddenly need those words, they don't come easily. Balance works the same way. When you stop asking your body to make tiny adjustments, it forgets how quickly it can respond when something unexpected happens. This is why falls often surprise people who still feel strong. They can carry groceries, they can climb stairs, they can stand for long periods. Strength isn't the issue, awareness and responsiveness are. One of the most common ways this mistake shows up is in how people walk inside their own homes. Shoes come off, which sounds healthy, but movement becomes casual. Feet barely leave the floor. Steps become more about gliding than stepping. Over time, the muscles that lift the foot weaken just enough to matter. The timing between foot and brain slows just enough to notice, but only when it's too late. Another way it appears is in how people stand up and sit down. Chairs get chosen for comfort rather than support. Hands get used more often to push up, even when the legs are capable. Again, this feels fine. Why struggle when you don't have to? But each time the legs don't do the full job, they learn that they're not required. And the body is efficient. If it thinks something isn't needed, it downshifts. Then there's the habit of always looking straight ahead or down at a phone while walking. Vision takes over for balance, and the feet become background players. This works until lighting changes, or a surface is uneven, or a distraction appears. When vision can't lead, the body scrambles to remember how to feel the ground again. None of this happens overnight. It happens in inches, not miles. And because it's gradual, people often adapt emotionally before they adapt physically. They start choosing safer routes. They avoid uneven ground. They move more carefully. This sounds wise, but it can quietly shrink the range of experiences the body knows how to handle. The irony is that the more we try to avoid falling by limiting movement, the less prepared we become to prevent a fall when life inevitably throws something unpredictable our way. Now here's the part that often surprises people. This mistake doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It means you've been listening to short-term comfort instead of long-term clarity. And that's human. The good news is that the same loyalty that allows the body to adapt away from balance also allows it to adapt back toward it. Not through dramatic routines, not through intense effort, but through small, intentional changes that reinvite the feet and the brain into the conversation. Before we talk about what that looks like, let's slow down and really understand why this matters after 75 more than at any other time. As we age, reaction time changes slightly. Not drastically, but enough that margins matter more. When you were younger, you could trip and recover almost automatically. The window for correction was wider. Now that window is narrower. That doesn't mean you're fragile. It means precision matters more. Feedback matters more. Awareness matters more. When a foot catches on something, the body has a fraction of a second to respond. If the brain has been receiving clear, frequent messages from the feet, it knows exactly what to do. If those messages have been muted by years of cushioning, shuffling, and passive movement, the response is slower and less coordinated. This is why many falls happen during turns. Turning requires quick communication between the feet and the rest of the body. If that communication isn't practiced, the turn becomes a moment of vulnerability. It's also why falls often happen when people are tired. Fatigue reduces attention, and when attention drops, habits take over. If the habit is passive movement, the body doesn't have a backup plan. The tiny daily mistake isn't one action, it's a pattern of letting movement become automatic instead of attentive, of letting comfort replace feedback, of letting the environment do the work instead of the body. But here's where the story shifts, because awareness alone can change the ending. Once people notice this pattern, they often feel a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because it's something they can influence, frustration because no one pointed it out earlier. Why isn't this talked about more? Why do we hear about strength and flexibility, but not about the quality of everyday movement? The answer is simple. Tiny mistakes don't sell well. They're not dramatic. They don't make headlines. But they shape outcomes. So let's bring this back into the light in a practical, human way. Think about how you put on your shoes. Do you slide your feet in without looking? Do you balance on one foot briefly, or sit down automatically? Neither is right or wrong, but one asks your body to engage more than the other. That engagement is a form of rehearsal. Think about how you brush your teeth. Do you stand evenly on both feet, or do you lean into the counter? Again, leaning feels comfortable. It reduces effort. But standing independently, even for 2 minutes, asks your body to maintain quiet balance. Think about how you reach for objects. Do you move your feet to position yourself, or do you twist from the waist? Twisting saves time. Moving the feet builds coordination. These moments are not exercises. They're choices, and they add up. One of the most powerful shifts happens when people start paying attention to the soles of their feet again. Not obsessively, just curiously. Feeling how weight moves from heel to toe. Noticing how the ground feels through different surfaces. Letting the feet wake up. This doesn't mean walking barefoot on dangerous surfaces or doing anything extreme. It means occasionally choosing shoes that let you feel the ground instead of erasing it. It means lifting the feet a little more deliberately when walking indoors. It means noticing whether one foot feels less confident than the other and giving it a bit more attention. Another quiet change is allowing the body to solve small balance challenges instead of avoiding them. Standing on one foot briefly while holding on to something lightly, not to prove anything, but to remind the body that it still knows how. Turning slowly but fully instead of pivoting minimally. Stepping over small obstacles instead of always going around them when it's safe. The goal is not to challenge the body, it's to include it. What often happens when people do this is a return of trust. They start feeling more grounded, more present in their movements. They stop bracing for instability because their body starts offering stability again. And here's something important that rarely gets said. Confidence follows competence. When the body feels capable, the mind relaxes. When the mind relaxes, movement becomes smoother. This loop is protective. Falls are not just physical events. They're emotional ones. They shake confidence. They create hesitation. They make people second-guess movements they've done their whole lives. Preventing a fall isn't just about avoiding injury. It's about preserving ease. This is why catching this mistake early or even late matters so much. You might be thinking, I've been moving this way for years. Is it really possible to change now? And the answer is yes. Because you're not starting from zero. You're starting from experience. The body remembers more than we give it credit for. It just needs an invitation. That invitation can be as simple as slowing down transitions, standing up with attention instead of momentum, pausing for half a second before taking the first step, letting the feet fully land before shifting weight. These pauses are not signs of weakness. They're signs of control. There's also something deeply respectful about this approach. It doesn't tell you to fight your body or push through discomfort. It asks you to listen, to collaborate, to move with intention. And intention changes outcomes. People who make these subtle shifts often report something unexpected. They feel younger, not because their bodies have changed dramatically, but because their movements feel clearer, less foggy, less tentative. They feel like they're driving again instead of being carried. This clarity is addictive in the best way. It encourages curiosity. What else have I been doing on autopilot? And that curiosity spills into other areas of life. Now, let's address the quiet resistance that sometimes comes up. The thought that says, I don't want to think about my feet all day. You don't have to. Awareness doesn't mean constant attention. It means occasional check-ins, little reminders, gentle corrections. Just like posture. You don't hold perfect posture all day. You notice when you've slumped, and you adjust. Balance works the same way. The real danger is not the mistake itself. It's the belief that it's too small to matter. Small things matter more when margins are thinner. And after 75, margins are thinner. Not because you're weaker, but because precision has replaced power as the body's main ally. This is also why people who stay active but ignore this aspect still fall. Activity alone isn't enough if it's done on autopilot. Walking miles without awareness can reinforce the same patterns that create instability. Awareness turns movement into nourishment. There's a story I hear often. Someone says, my fall came out of nowhere. And when we talk longer, it turns out there were signs. A little more stumbling on rugs, a little more reliance on walls, a little more hesitation on stairs. These weren't warnings in the dramatic sense. They were whispers. The tiny daily mistake teaches us not to hear whispers. But once you start listening again, the body speaks clearly. This is where I want to gently invite you to do something that helps more people hear this message. If this perspective resonates, if it puts words to something you've felt but couldn't explain, take a moment to like this video. Not as a favor, but as a way of telling yourself that this kind of awareness matters. When you comment, you reinforce it. When you subscribe, you keep this conversation present in your life. These actions aren't about a platform. They're about choosing clarity over autopilot, because clarity compounds. As the days go on, you might notice subtle changes. You catch yourself lifting your feet more. You feel the ground differently. You turn with more confidence. These aren't dramatic victories. They're quiet ones. And quiet victories are the ones that last. There's something deeply empowering about realizing that prevention doesn't always look like effort. Sometimes it looks like attention. The tiny daily mistake loses its power the moment it's named. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's a gift. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need special equipment. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to invite your feet back into the conversation and let your body remember what it already knows. Falls are not inevitable. They're often the final chapter of a story that can be rewritten earlier. And that rewrite starts with the smallest change. The decision to move with awareness today, so tomorrow feels steadier. If you stay with that decision, quietly, consistently, you give yourself something invaluable. Not just safety, but confidence. Not just prevention, but presence. And presence, more than anything, is what keeps us upright in a world that keeps moving. Presence is a simple word, but after 75, it carries a different weight. It's no longer about paying attention to the world outside, the news, the noise, the constant stream of information. It becomes about being inside your own body, feeling where you place your feet, noticing how your weight shifts, moving at a pace that belongs to you, not to the clock. And that changes everything, because when the body is present, it gives warnings early. Quiet warnings, polite ones, a slight wobble when you turn too quickly, a strange sensation when you put weight on one foot after sitting for a while, a step that doesn't feel as confident as it used to. These are not danger signs. They are messages. They're the body saying, pay attention here. Pay. The daily mistake we're talking about teaches the body to ignore those messages, to override them, to compensate without awareness, to lean instead of step, to grab instead of adjust, to trust furniture more than sensation. Over time, this changes something fundamental. The body stops believing it's responsible for balance because something else is always doing the job for it. And when something else isn't there, when the chair's just a little farther away, when the wall isn't where you expect it, when the floor is uneven, that's when the fall happens. Most people think falls are about weakness. They're not. They're about timing, about coordination, about the speed at which the body can recognize a problem and respond. Strength helps, yes, but only if the message arrives in time. After 75, the margin for correction is smaller. That's not a flaw. It's simply reality. When you were younger, you could catch yourself almost without thinking. Your body had room to make mistakes. Now the body needs clearer information sooner. And that information comes from awareness, not force. This is why so many falls happen during normal moments. Turning around to answer someone, stepping sideways in the kitchen, getting up at night without fully waking the body. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless. Just a moment where the body was asked to respond faster than it had been trained to. And this is where the mistake becomes clear. It's not that people stop moving. It's that they stop listening while moving. They walk, but they don't feel the step. They stand, but they don't feel the weight distribution. They sit and rise, but momentum does the work instead of coordination. Movement becomes something to get through, not something to participate in. This often starts with comfort. Softer shoes, more supportive chairs, smoother surfaces. These things aren't bad. The problem is when they replace sensation instead of supporting it. When the feet stop feeling the ground, the brain slowly disconnects from the details of balance. And balance lives in details. It lives in how quickly the foot recognizes pressure, in how accurately the body senses its position in space, in how smoothly one movement flows into the next. These are not big, visible skills. They're quiet systems working in the background, and they only stay sharp if they're used. One of the most revealing moments for many people is when they realize how little they lift their feet while walking at home. The step becomes a glide. The foot barely clears the floor. It feels efficient. It feels safe. Until it isn't. A rug edge, a cord, a slightly raised threshold. Things that were always there suddenly become hazards. Not because they changed, but because the body stopped preparing for them. Another subtle habit is how people turn. Instead of stepping and turning the whole body, they twist first and let the feet follow. Again, this feels faster, easier, but it puts the body briefly out of alignment. If the feet don't respond quickly, balance is compromised. None of these habits feel dangerous in the moment. That's what makes them powerful. They don't trigger fear. They don't feel like risks. They feel like adaptations. Sensible ones. And that's why people are often shocked when they fall. They don't see it coming, because nothing felt wrong before it happened. But the body had been practicing that moment for years. Now here's the part that matters most. This pattern is reversible. Not through effort, not through pushing, but through attention. The body doesn't need to be trained like a machine. It needs to be reminded. It needs opportunities to do what it was designed to do. Sense, adjust, respond. This starts with slowing down transitions, standing up without rushing, letting the feet settle before taking the first step, pausing for a breath before turning. These pauses are not hesitation. They're recalibration. When people start doing this, they often notice something unexpected. Movement feels smoother, more deliberate, less rushed. There's a sense of being inside the motion again. That's presence returning. Another shift happens when people allow the feet to work again, feeling the ground through the soles, letting weight move naturally from heel to toe, paying attention to how one foot compares to the other. This isn't analysis, it's curiosity. Curiosity is powerful because it removes judgment. You're not trying to fix anything, you're just noticing. And the body responds quickly to being noticed. Small moments become opportunities. Standing at the sink without leaning, putting on shoes while briefly balancing, reaching for objects by stepping closer instead of twisting. These aren't exercises, they're reminders. Over time, these reminders rebuild confidence from the inside, not the kind of confidence that says, nothing will happen, but the kind that says, if something happens, my body knows what to do. That confidence changes behavior subtly. People stop rushing. They stop bracing. They stop moving as if the world is full of threats. And that alone reduces risk, because fear stiffens movement. Stiff movement reduces adaptability. Adaptability is what prevents falls. This is why prevention isn't about restriction. It's about freedom. The freedom to move naturally, with awareness, without second-guessing every step. Many people think the solution to falling is to be more careful. But care without awareness leads to tension. Awareness leads to ease, and ease is stable. There's a quiet dignity in moving with intention, in not letting the day push your body around, in choosing how you stand, how you step, how you turn. This isn't about age, it's about ownership. After 75, ownership matters more than ever. You don't need to do more. You need to do with more presence. That's why this mistake is so important to name. Once you see it, you start catching it in real time. You notice when you're shuffling, when you're leaning unnecessarily, when you're moving without feeling. And in those moments, you have a choice. That choice is powerful. And this is where I want to speak to you directly. If this way of seeing movement resonates, if it feels like it explains something you've experienced but never quite articulated, take a moment to like this video. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. It's a way of saying, this matters to me. If you comment, you reinforce that awareness. You bring it into language, and when you subscribe, you keep this kind of clarity close, not because you need reminders of danger, but because you value staying in control of your body and your choices. Control doesn't mean rigidity. It means responsiveness. Falls are not random. They are often the end result of years of unconscious movement. But that also means they can be prevented by years, or even months, of conscious movement. Not dramatic change. Quiet change. The kind that doesn't draw attention. The kind that doesn't require announcements. The kind that simply feels better. You may not notice the shift immediately, but one day you'll turn quickly and feel steady. You'll step on an uneven surface and adjust without thinking. You'll catch yourself before you even realize you could have fallen. And you'll understand something important. Stability isn't something you lost with age. It's something that drifted out of focus. Bringing it back doesn't require youth. It requires attention. And attention is always available. The smallest daily mistake loses its power the moment it's seen. From that point on, every step becomes a quiet act of prevention. Every movement becomes a conversation instead of a gamble. That's how falls are avoided. Not by fear, not by limitation, but by presence. And presence, more than anything else, is what keeps us upright. Today, tomorrow, and for as long as we choose to stay connected to our own movement.